My name is Michael. I'm 29, and I was supposed to be in this city for nothing more than a short business trip. Meetings, presentations, polite small talk with colleagues. That was the plan. But plans are fragile things. That evening, exhausted from hours in a conference room, I returned to my hotel and ordered dinner. I just wanted silence, food, and maybe an early night. But when the waiter appeared at my door, he carried a tray that wasn't mine, dishes I had never ordered. I was about to correct the mistake when another knock came, softer this time. I opened the door, and there she was. A woman in a silk robe, her hair slightly undone, her smile both apologetic and mischievous. The food was hers. The mistake belonged to the hotel. But the strange turn of events, that belonged to us. We laughed about it, and before I even realized what I was doing, I asked if she wanted to share the meal. To my surprise, she agreed. And just like that, the night began to unravel in a way I could never have predicted. She stepped into my room with a kind of easy confidence that made me wonder if she had done this before. Not with me, of course, but with life itself. She seemed to move as though every accident, every coincidence, was meant to happen exactly that way. I cleared the small table near the sofa, and we placed the dishes there. The room smelled faintly of pasta, garlic, and the clean, faintly perfumed air that followed her in. We sat down, closer than strangers normally should, but neither of us mentioned it. At first, the conversation was light. She told me her name, Anna. She was staying 2 doors down, in town for reasons she left vague. I offered details about myself only in fragments. My work, my city, the fact that business trips had become routine. But the more we spoke, the less it felt like a passing encounter. It was as if we had accidentally bypassed the awkward first stage of meeting someone and dropped directly into the comfort of familiarity. We passed the fork back and forth, eating from the same plate, laughing about how absurd it was. I noticed the way her eyes lingered when I spoke, how she tilted her head slightly, as though she was memorizing every word. The pauses between our sentences began to stretch, not uncomfortably, but in a way that suggested something unspoken was hanging in the air, waiting to be acknowledged. When the waiter returned with wine, red, expensive, not what I had asked for, Anna raised her glass and said with mock seriousness, "Now this feels less like a mistake and more like a date." Her tone was playful, but something shifted inside me. My heart beat faster, and suddenly I was aware of how close her knee was to mine, of the warmth of her presence. I tried to respond casually, but I could hear the edge in my voice, the awareness that the night was already different than I had planned. We clinked glasses, and for a moment the world outside the hotel room faded. The wine softened the edges of the day, and soon the hotel room felt less like a place I was renting and more like a space suspended outside of time. Anna curled one leg under herself on the sofa, turning fully toward me. Her silk robe slipped slightly off her shoulder, and though she didn't seem to notice, I could hardly look away. We spoke about travel. She described nights in Lisbon, mornings in Paris, and rainy afternoons in Prague. Her voice carried the rhythm of someone who had lived, not just passed through places. When I asked what brought her here, she hesitated, smiled, and said, "Sometimes the reason isn't as important as the timing." I didn't push. Instead, I told her about my job, the endless cycles of projects, the way airports had become as familiar as grocery stores. She laughed softly, telling me I looked too young to sound so tired. That laugh, it lingered in the air longer than it should have. The conversation drifted into books, music, even childhood memories. There were pauses, but never empty ones. There were pauses filled with glances, with the silent awareness of something unfolding. When she reached for the wine, her fingers brushed against mine. It was a fleeting touch, but it sent a current through me, a reminder that this was no longer just dinner between strangers. At one point, she leaned back, gazing at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, half curiosity, half challenge. "Funny," she said, "how quickly you can feel like you've known someone longer than a few hours." I nodded, though words failed me. I didn't want to break the fragile spell of that moment. Outside, the city lights flickered beyond the window, But inside, the air grew warmer, heavier, as if the room itself was conspiring to erase the line between coincidence and connection. The hours slipped past U.S. unnoticed. What began as casual conversation over shared pasta had turned into something quieter, something threaded with an unspoken gravity neither of us dared name aloud. The clock on the nightstand crept toward midnight, but neither of us moved to acknowledge it. Anna shifted slightly, her knee brushing against mine. She didn't pull away. Instead, she let it rest there as if it belonged. The wine was nearly gone, but her eyes seemed brighter than ever, catching the warm glow of the lamp. She asked me what I was afraid of most. The question was sudden, almost disarming. I thought for a moment, then admitted that sometimes I feared wasting time, losing days to routines, months to obligations, years to things that didn't matter in the end. Her gaze softened, and for a brief moment, she looked vulnerable, her playful exterior slipping. "I know that feeling," she murmured. "You wake up one day and realize you've been living the life someone else wrote for you." Her words lingered in the air between us. I wanted to ask more, to understand what she meant, but something about her tone told me it wasn't the night for interrogations. Instead, I told her that maybe nights like this, unexpected, unplanned, were life's way of reminding us that we still had choices. She smiled at that, a slow, knowing smile. Then silence fell again, not uncomfortable, but dense with possibility. I could hear the faint hum of the hotel's heating system, the muted city noise far below, and beneath it all, the rhythm of my own heartbeat. She set her glass down, her fingers lingering on the rim before pulling away. "It's late," she said, though there was no urgency in her voice. The way she looked at me made it clear that neither of us wanted the night to end just yet. The silence stretched, heavy but alive, like the pause before a storm breaks. Anna leaned back against the sofa, her robe slipping a little further down her shoulder, revealing a line of skin that caught the light. She didn't adjust it. She just looked at me, steady, as if testing how long I could hold her gaze. I felt the air between us thicken, and my usual certainty deserted me. In meetings, I was decisive. At home, practical. But here now, with her so close, every word I might have said felt inadequate. She broke the quiet first. "Do you ever wonder," she asked softly, "why some people cross our path only once, yet they leave an impression stronger than those we've known for years?" Her question hit me deeper than I expected. "Yes," I said after a moment. "And sometimes I think it's because we're meant to remember them, even if it's only for one night." She tilted her head, her lips curving into the faintest smile. "And what if one night could change more than that?" My breath caught. I couldn't tell if she was teasing or confessing something, and maybe it didn't matter. The truth was in the way she leaned closer, her perfume mingling with the wine, the way her fingers traced the edge of her glass before resting on the sofa between us. Close enough that if I moved my hand an inch, we would touch. I did. Our fingers brushed, hesitated, then intertwined. Her hand was warm, delicate but certain. She didn't pull away. Outside, a car horn echoed faintly from the street below. Inside, the world felt reduced to this, the quiet hum of electricity, the faint glow of the lamp, and the unmistakable pull between us. It was then I realized, whatever tomorrow brought, tonight had already stepped beyond chance. Her hand in mine felt like an unspoken agreement. Neither of us said anything, but in that quiet contact, there was a shift, gentle, undeniable. Anna's eyes flicked down to where our fingers intertwined, then back up to mine. She didn't smile this time. Instead, her expression carried a seriousness that caught me off guard. The lamp cast a warm pool of light across the room, leaving the corners in shadow. It felt as though the world outside had dissolved, leaving only this fragile space we had created. "Michael," she said finally, her voice lower now, "do you believe in moments that change everything?" I swallowed, searching for the right answer. "I think," I said slowly, "that sometimes you only realize afterward that a moment changed you." Her lips parted as though she might say more, but instead she leaned closer, the silk of her robe brushing lightly against my arm. I could feel the faint warmth of her body, the subtle rhythm of her breathing. The anticipation between us built, but she didn't rush it. She let it unfold like a secret being revealed one fragment at a time. We sat there, suspended, as if the night itself was holding its breath. Then, almost imperceptibly, she closed the space between us. Her head tilted slightly, her hair falling forward, and her lips brushed mine. It wasn't hurried, not demanding, just a soft, testing kiss, as if asking a question rather than giving an answer. When she pulled back, her eyes searched mine. "See?" she whispered, almost playfully, though her voice trembled at the edges. One moment, I exhaled, realizing I hadn't been breathing properly. The weight of everything, the trip, the randomness of the mistake, the hours we had shared, suddenly felt like they had been leading here. I tightened my hand around hers, steady now, certain. "Yes," I said quietly. "One moment." And just like that, the night took on a different meaning. The kiss lingered in my mind, even after her lips had left mine. It was as if the air itself carried the echo of it, a trace of something delicate yet powerful enough to shift the ground beneath us. Anna didn't move away. Her hand remained in mine, her body angled toward me, her presence filling the room with a kind of quiet intensity. She leaned back slightly, her eyes holding mine, and for a moment neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't empty. It was charged, humming with the possibilities of what might happen next. "I wasn't planning on this," she said softly, almost to herself. "Tonight was supposed to be ordinary." I laughed under my breath, though it wasn't out of humor. "Me too. Dinner alone, maybe an early night. And yet, here we are." Her lips curved into a small smile, but her gaze stayed thoughtful, as if she was weighing something invisible. She lifted her glass, finished the last sip of wine, and set it carefully on the table. Then she tucked her legs beneath her, pulling the robe tighter around her, though it did little to hide the graceful line of her collarbone, the soft curve of her shoulder. "Do you ever wonder," she asked, "what makes us say yes? To people, to nights like this, to things we know might change us?" Her words struck me, and I realized she wasn't just asking for the sake of conversation. She was asking about us, about the very moment we were standing in. "I think," I answered slowly, "that sometimes saying yes is less about knowing what will happen and more about trusting that we'll regret it if we don't." She studied me for a heartbeat, then exhaled a quiet, almost relieved sound. Her hand tightened around mine again, firmer this time, as though she had made some silent decision. The night outside stretched endlessly, but in that room time felt compressed, concentrated. It wasn't about hours anymore. It was about moments strung together, each one daring us to step further past the line of chance and into something uncharted. And we both knew we were about to. Anna shifted closer, the space between us dissolving until there was no clear boundary of where she ended and I began. The lamp on the nightstand flickered slightly, or maybe it was my perception, but the shadows on her face seemed alive, shifting, as if the night itself leaned into witness. Her hand slipped from mine only to rest lightly on my chest, her fingers tracing the edge of my shirt. The touch was feather-light, almost uncertain, yet it carried more weight than any words we could have spoken. My heart raced beneath her palm, and I knew she could feel it. For a long moment, she just looked at me. Her eyes were dark, reflective, filled with something I couldn't entirely name. Curiosity, longing, perhaps a kind of hesitation that made the moment all the more fragile. "Michael," she whispered, my name carrying a softness I hadn't heard before. "If tomorrow feels different, will you regret this?" The question landed like a test, like she was asking for permission not just from me, but from herself. I shook my head, steady, certain now in a way I hadn't been all evening. "No, the only regret would be pretending tonight didn't happen." Something in her face eased. She leaned forward, slower this time, deliberate, and kissed me again. The second kiss wasn't tentative. It was an answer. It deepened, grew warmer, carrying with it the weight of two strangers deciding not to remain strangers anymore. The room seemed to shrink as the world outside disappeared entirely. Her robe slid further as she shifted against me, and I felt her relax into the space we had created, a shared silence filled with the rhythm of breath and heartbeat. It wasn't just desire that filled the air. It was the recognition that this night was no longer an accident. It was a choice, mutual and undeniable. And as the minutes stretched into something slower, heavier, I realized the line we had been carefully walking all evening was gone. We had crossed it together. Time became unmeasured after that. What happened between us felt less like a sequence of events and more like a current we allowed ourselves to be carried by. The world beyond those hotel walls ceased to exist. There was only the warmth of her skin, the quiet cadence of her breath, and the stillness that followed each stolen kiss. Later, when the room had grown quiet again, Anna lay beside me, her head resting lightly on my shoulder. The robe was draped carelessly at the foot of the sofa, the lamp still casting its warm, amber glow across the room. She traced idle patterns against my arm with her fingertip, as though sketching invisible truths she didn't want to put into words. Neither of us rushed to speak. When she finally did, her voice was quieter than before, tinged with something I hadn't heard from her yet: uncertainty. "Sometimes I think it's easier with strangers," she whispered. "You can give them pieces of yourself you'd never risk giving someone who's part of your everyday life. Because when morning comes, you can choose whether or not they'll stay in your story." Her words settled into me, weighty and raw. I turned to face her, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "And what if I want you to stay?" She smiled faintly, but her eyes flickered away as if the answer was too complicated for this hour. "Then tomorrow we'll have to decide for us." The city outside pulsed faintly with late-night life, but here, in this suspended pocket of time, it felt like we had stepped outside of reality. I closed my eyes for a moment, aware of her breathing, of the way her hand finally stilled against my chest. And though I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, I knew one thing with absolute clarity. This night was no longer something I could file away as coincidence. It had become a turning point.